The love of God is a proven reality. It is a fact in history. Now, how do you measure love? We use the word love all the time. We talk about love all the time, but we know there are different types of love. We love a lot of people and we love a lot of things, but we don't love everything equally. We love some things and some people way more than some things and other people. And so how do you measure love? Well, if you're going to measure love, you need to measure two factors. First is the costliness of the gift. What does it cost you? The very nature of love is that it's sacrificial. It's going to cost you something. And so if you're trying to measure love, you need to know, what does it cost someone to give someone something? The second factor is the worthiness of the recipient. The worthiness of the recipient. How worthy is the recipient to receive the gift, to receive the sacrifice? Romans 5:6, for while we were still helpless at the right time, Christ died for the ungodly. For rarely will someone die for a just person, though for a good person, perhaps someone might even dare to die. You know, there are people in your life that you would likely die for. I mean, if you made a list, tell me 5 people, 6 people, 10 people right now you would die for. You would have people on that list. You know, for me, I think I would willingly die for my wife and my kids. Someone broke into our house, I think I would take a bullet for them. I don't think I would pull Meg in front of me and say, you know, it's sugar, it's time for you to die for me. I don't think I would do that. I think I would, I don't know. Well, I hope that never happens. But in my soul, I feel prepared to die for them. And then there are other people in my life, and I would die for them. I would die for them, and I would die for their kids. There's some of you here. I would die for you. All of you? No way. You're on your own. But some of you, I would die for you. And when you face death, when you're looking at life and death, not hypothetically, but in reality, something happens to your soul. The calculations begin to change. Someone posted this meme this week. I thought it was pretty good. It's man survives attack by grizzly bear with just a .22 pistol and 1 bullet. Okay, that's impressive. And then you go to the next slide. The man he shot in the knee was not so lucky. And I think to myself, yeah, in that situation, you're facing death. It's like the calculations, they begin to change in your mind. Is it me? Do I die, or does that person die? If only one of us is going to live, who lives and who dies? And see, in the situation with my wife, if it came down to it and I died for my wife, it would be a big cost for me to die. But see, in my mind, she's worthy of it. You know, she's worthy of it. She's better than me. In my mind, I'm like, that's not that difficult of a decision. So there's not great distance between the cost of the gift, and then the recipient of the gift. Now let's consider who we are. Now, who are we in our relationship to God? We are described in 5 ways in Romans chapter 5. First, we are described as being helpless, powerless. We are ungodly. We are sinners. We are enemies. We are not good. We are not righteous. And we are under wrath. We're helpless, ungodly, godless. We're sinners. We're enemies. We're not good. We're not righteous. And therefore, we are under the wrath of God. And over the years, when I talk to people about how the Bible describes humanity, what are human beings like? Apart from the grace of God, we'll go through these truths. We're sinners. We're enemies. We're separated from God. And the list goes on. And when people hear that, this is how people respond. They go, yeah, but God obviously takes into consideration all the good stuff I do. And there's a lot of good stuff that God needs to consider. And when I hear that, I think, no, he doesn't. He really doesn't. That's what Romans 1-3 is all about. That he does. There isn't good stuff for him to consider. A lot of people think that what God sees in people is a top layer, an external layer of sin and ungodliness. But as you go deeper into the human soul, you will find human goodness. That people are like, yeah, we mess up on the outside, but the deeper you go into the human soul, the more you will find human virtue. The more you will find human goodness. But that's not true. And we know that's not true. The top layer of humanity is the most virtuous. by far. The external is the most presentable by far. And we know this to be true. The deeper you get into the soul, the darker it gets. The deeper you get into the soul, the more dysfunction you find. Are you more sinful on the outside or on the inside? Are you more sinful in what you do or in what you think? See, the deeper we go into our own souls, the more darkness we find. We don't find more and more virtue. You know, are you more virtuous in public when everyone is watching, or when you're in private when no one is watching? And for all of us, the answer is the same. The external is the most presentable. What's happening on the outside is the most presentable. There is no human goodness at our core apart from Christ. And this is the point that Paul is making. Romans 5:7, for rarely will someone die for a just person, though for a good person perhaps someone might even dare to die. Verse 8, but God proves, he demonstrates, he proves his own love for us, in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. At the height of our sin, when we deserved it the very least, that is when Christ died. Imagine someone broke into your house and killed your spouse and killed your kids, but one of your kids was able to escape. Eventually, the police track down the man who killed your family. You go to trial. The judge asks the guy they arrested, did you do it? He says, I did it. I absolutely did it. He confesses to it. The evidence is presented. It's clear he's guilty. And imagine the day when the judge delivers the punishment. So that day, what a horrible thought experiment, where you get to the day when the judge is going to announce the punishment for the person who killed your wife and your kids. The agony. And the day comes and the judge says, since I'm such a merciful judge and loving judge, therefore you, guilty sinner, criminal, you may go free. And he walks out of the courtroom with no record, totally free. What would you think as a husband? Would you praise the judge for his mercy or despise him for his unrighteousness? You would hate him. You would hate a judge that would say, I am so merciful that I'm going to totally disregard the injustice that has been committed. You may go free. And a quick note about the character of God is that a God who forgives sin by sweeping sin under the rug is a God you would never love or worship. You would never worship him and you would never love him. A God who just sweeps sin under the rug does not deal with human suffering. A God who just looks at what happens and says, no big deal, is a God you would hate at your core. And that God is not real. That's not the God of the Bible. That's not a virtuous God. Now go back into the courtroom and imagine that father who's been so greatly sinned against. His wife dead, his children dead. And now the day of judgment has come, the sentencing is being passed down. Now imagine a father who goes before the judge and says, Judge, this man killed my family, he's guilty, he's worthy of death, but I will gladly die for him. Will you punish me instead of him? You would never do that. We would never do that because we don't love the way that God loves. But the point that Paul is making is much stronger than that. The argument Paul is making is much, much stronger. It's even more unimaginable. It's not the Father who dies in place of his enemies. It is the Son.